Hello everyone, welcome to CEC lecture. The topic of analysis is Capitalism, Meaning and Typology. In this lecture, we shall discuss various aspects relating to the concept of capitalism. This lecture shall also reflect on the important perspectives taken from the discipline of economics, political economy, business management to discuss the concept of capitalism. This lecture shall also elaborate on various types, advantages and disadvantages of the concept of capitalism. As we begin, a very important aspect, that is, what do we mean by capitalism? Capitalism, it is a socio-economic system, and as distinct from other systems like socialism and communism, the important focus for capitalism is on private ownership of resources or capital. Now, this private ownership of resources and capital is linked to the idea of profit. It is the system of production of goods and services wherein it is based on forces of supply and demand. Then there is emphasis on private property, the rights of owners who own the property, and most towards profit making. There is an important aspect, that is, with production based on supply and demand, emphasis on private property, profit making. Capitalism then also opposes to interference by any authority. Therefore, there is focus on free market, and this is essential to understand for the concept of capitalism, because this is what makes capitalism different from other economic systems like socialism and communism. Now, we all know that capitalism played a very important role in the contemporary world history. We all know that after the Second World War, the world saw the rise of the Cold War, which was an ideological war between two superpowers, namely United States of America versus the then USSR. And the two superpowers there was an ideological clash between the two superpowers, namely capitalism versus communism as an economic policy, as an economic model to be followed for the world. Herein it becomes then essential to understand the deeper meaning of capitalism. And for that, we take a very important text from the discipline of economics, particularly microeconomics, the work of Adam Smith. Adam Smith opines that the heart of capitalism and at the heart of liberty lies the commitment to the good of humankind. So herein we need to understand the bigger philosophical meaning of the idea of good of humankind. That is, why does Adam Smith opine that at the heart of capitalism and at the heart of liberty lies the commitment to the good of humankind? The important question also related to it is then, what are the characteristics of a capitalist economy? For that, we take reference to Adam Smith's work, The Wealth of Nations, 1776. In this work, Adam Smith makes some important observations, namely, human beings are self-serving by nature. Human beings also seek the fulfillment of their self-interest. In this scenario, Adam Smith opines that society would benefit with two things. And what are the two things? First, there should be no monopolies. Second, there should be unrestricted competition. So therefore, Adam Smith points out that there is no need for the government or any outside force to interfere or try to regulate the market. Adam Smith also opines in his book The Wealth of Nations that it's the invisible hand of the market. This invisible hand of the market is important to understand because it will allow self-interest of each individual to provide for the overall interest of society. Further, Adam Smith also points out that efficiency is an important ingredient in a capitalist economy. To quote from Adam Smith's work, if one man draws out the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, a fourth points it, and so on. Therefore, more pins could be produced this way than if the person made the whole pin each time. So therefore, with this also one can see that this was also an important aspect with reference to the rise and birth of the modern day industry. Now, as we are discussing Adam Smith's work with reference to the wealth of nations, laissez-faire economics becomes an important aspect that we must deliberate upon. Now, laissez-faire economics too has an important bearing with reference to the concept of capitalism. Let us understand how. Laissez-faire economics talks about free, self-interested economic transactions to promote well-being of society. Laissez-faire economics also then talks about disapproval of government's attempt to regulate economy and competition. In this perspective, therefore, laissez-faire, that is the French word, that is let it, them do, right? So laissez-faire economics then as an idea that markets tend to work best when the government leaves them alone. Capitalism also, in its quest for profit, also works on this important idea that as long as government non-interference works to the betterment of profit initiative, it is an appropriate system. Now, important economic laws that are coming from laissez-faire economics that also have bearing with reference to the concept of capitalism, that is, first, law of self-interest. That is, people work for their own good. It is the self-well-being which is most important. Second, law of competition. That is, competition, it drives people to make better product for lower price. And then the law of demand and supply. Now, as we are understanding laissez-faire economics and its important bearing with reference to the profit initiative, the private ownership initiative of capitalism, it is also essential to understand capital accumulation. What do we mean by capital accumulation? It implies growth in wealth through investments or profit. Further, capital accumulation, it is a means to grow wealth. And what are the examples? Appreciation, rent, capital gain, interest, amongst others. What is the importance of capital accumulation? Because this is an important phenomena that drives capitalism too. And herein we take reference to the work, the perspective presented by Adam Smith. For Adam Smith, capital accumulation is significant because building up capital is an essential condition for economic progress. Further, that is, the more one invests, the more we invest, the more efficient our production becomes. To quote from Adam Smith's work, and this work is available at adamsmith.org for the benefit of our viewers and learners, we quoted Adam Smith opines, that is, capitalists are increased by parsimony and diminished by prodigality and misconduct. Parsimony and not industry, that is the immediate cause for the increase of capitalism. Further, industry thus remains focused on the nation's most important needs, that is without the need for central direction. Further, as we are understanding capitalism, it is essential to understand commodity also, because capitalism as a system operating for profit and private ownership somewhere got the impetus with commodities. What is commodity? Basic good used in trade and commerce that is interchangeable with other goods of the same type. Commodity production, therefore, it is a form of social production in which goods are produced not for direct consumption but for exchange. And this production for exchange is an important factor with reference to profit aspect of the capitalist model. As we all know, that private ownership is also very significant to understand capitalism. Private ownership can be defined, that is, where we take this definition from Collins English Dictionary for the benefit of our learners to present a simple definition, that is, private ownership, the fact of being owned by a private individual or organization rather than by the state or the public body. So capitalist system therefore gives a lot of emphasis to private ownership, that is, someone who owns property is entitled to any value associated with the property, and this too becomes very important to understand the working of the capitalist system. Now, price mechanism is also very important aspect to the concept of capitalism. That is, price mechanism refers to the system where the forces of demand and supply determine the prices of commodities and the changes therein. Further, it is the buyers and sellers who actually determine the price of a commodity. That is, under price mechanism, if demand increases, price will rise, and this will cause a movement along the supply curve. Now, prices, as we are understanding with reference to capitalism as a concept, prices, dear learners, have some important function. Herein we point out three separate functions that prices play. And what are they? Rationing, signaling, and incentive function. So therefore, price mechanism is very significant in a capitalist economy also, because in a capitalist economy, the prices of all goods and services will be decided by the market forces exclusively, that is, the forces of demand and supply. Now, as we are understanding the concept of capitalism with reference to issues of profit, private ownership, laissez-faire economy, laissez-faire economies and the laws of demand and supply, price mechanism, amongst others, we also need to take into account a critical perspective. And for that, we take reference to the work of the German philosopher Karl Marx. Karl Marx, in his very important works, Das Kapital, the Communist Manifesto, pointed towards some very important issues that are very integral to understand the working of the capitalist system. Karl Marx points out that capitalism as a progressive historical stage that would eventually stagnate due to internal contradictions, and this capitalism would be followed by socialism. Marx points out that like feudalism, capitalism also carries the seeds of its own destruction. We all know when we talk about causes responsible for the rise of capitalism in 16th and 17th century Europe, apart from the rise of industrial revolution, the process of colonization, colonialism and imperialism, Renaissance in Europe, the important aspect that is downfall of feudalism paved way for the rise of capitalism as an economic model. And this is why Marx also made an important prediction, that is, capitalism was destined to collapse, that is, through a revolution where the working class, the proletariat, would overthrow the owning class, the rich class, that is the bourgeoisie. So therefore, Marx points out in his very important work, the Communist Manifesto, and we quote from that work in order to elaborate towards the critical side of our understanding of concept of capitalism. That is, Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto, and we quote, "The history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles, freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman. In a word, oppressor and oppressed stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight that each time ended either in the revolutionary reconstruction of society at large or the common ruin of the contending classes." So therefore, herein, Karl Marx understands that capitalism will suffer, will end because of its own contradictions through a revolution. Now, therein we have an important aspect of our lecture, that is various types of capitalism. Turbo capitalism implies unregulated form of capitalism with financial deregulation, privatization and lowering the taxes on high earners. Turbo capitalism implies and it involves absence of regulation for the banking and especially the finance system. And the focus here is on the growing dominance of the unfettered capitalism. Another important type of capitalism is that of the state capitalism. What do we mean by state capitalism? State capitalism is an economic system in which private capitalism is modified by a varying degree of government ownership and control. Another important type of capitalism is the advanced capitalism. Now, as we talk about advanced capitalism, the research and the work, the perspective of the Frankfurt School critical theory is very important to take into account. The Frankfurt School critical theory is a critique of modernity and capitalist society with the definition of social emancipation amongst others. Seen from this perspective, advanced capitalism, it's a situation that pertains in a society in which how we need to understand that the capitalist model has been integrated and developed deeply for a prolonged period. Further, we have oligarchic capitalism. Oligarchy is a form of power structure in which power rests with a small number of people. So oligarchic capitalism signifies a situation where the control of resources of private ownership is in few hands, and therefore the profit also is there with few hands. Crony capitalism implies that is an allegedly capitalist economy in which success in business depends on close relationship between business people and the government officials. Come to an important part of our discussion, namely critical analysis of capitalism from advantages and disadvantages. With the idea that private ownership, profit making, somewhere leads to encouragement of innovation, it is argued that capitalism promotes equality, freedom, and entrepreneurship. Capitalism also drives out individuals, enterprises, industries, and firms to provide a wide range of products and services. It provides consumers then with ample choices. Then there is greater focus on efficiency with reference to the entire operation of capitalism as an economic model. Then every individual has some level of control over their work, over we can say over their fate. So this allows individual to choose in between commodities, purchase, employment opportunities, amongst others. At the same time, like any public discourse concept, capitalism too is contested. If it offers advantages, then there are disadvantages too. Namely, there is unequal distribution of income. One also cannot account for the instability, the unsteadiness of the capitalist economy with the rise and falls of market forces. Then somewhere it is a critique that capitalism with the focus towards profit ignores social welfare and social benefit. Then one does not account for inherited wealth, which further leads to wealth inequalities and how inequalities create social divisions. Dear learners, we hope that the lecture on capitalism, with reference to understanding its meaning as a concept and various aspects pertaining to it and various types of capitalism, provided you significant inputs and insights. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much.